Hey McKinley Bears, we're going to have another book reading today. This one is called Fanny, and it's written by Stephen Cosgrove and illustrated by Robin James. And Fanny is a cat. I hope you guys can see that. Beside a long, dusty, let's start over again. Hey McKinley Bears, we're going to have another book reading. This one's called Fanny, and it's written by Stephen Cosgrove and illustrated by Robin James. Beside a long, dusty road far out in the country was a lonely old wooden fence. The fence stood alone for miles and miles, with only sweet-smelling lilac and an occasional honeysuckle rose for companions. At the very end of the rickety picket fence was an old run-down farm nestled on top of a woodland hill. The farm was filled with all sorts of animals, though tough old chickens who laid very few eggs, some tough old cows who gave very little milk, and a small herd of tough old sheep who gave very little wool at all. And there's a picture of the farm. Amidst the animals of the old barnyard lived a fluffy gray cat named Fanny. In many ways, Fanny was an ordinary cat. She had an ordinary long, swishy tail, like all other cats. She had ordinary green eyes that looked at all the world in wonder, like all the other cats. Ordinary, yes, but different too, for Fanny only had 3 legs. Because Fanny only had 3 legs instead of 4, she had to hobble and hop to and fro to get there and back again. She hopped to get a drink of milk, and on warm spring days, hopped atop a fence to sun herself. Even though she had only 3 legs, Fanny got around pretty well. In fact, she needed no help from any of the other animals in the barnyard. Not that they ever offered any. So there's Fanny hopping on the fence. The other animals never talked to Fanny because they felt it was too embarrassing to talk to a creature who was handicapped. Whenever Fanny hobbled by the chickens, would turn their backs, ruffle their feathers, and look the other way. Sometimes a chick would try to talk to her, but one of the old hens would always come kickling and cackling to shoo the chick away. Don't talk to her, little chick. You would just embarrass her. Besides, she has nothing to say. But Fanny would act as if she didn't mind and hobble on her way. Whenever she hopped by the dairy barn, all of the cows would gawk and stare with big brown blinking eyes as she passed. If one of the calves tried to stick its neck through the fence to talk to her, one of the old bossy milk cows would moo it away and say, "Don't stare, you silly calf. You'll just embarrass her. Besides, she has nothing to say." Fanny would just pretend she didn't hear, and as she batted at a bumblebee or butterfly that happened to be flying by. There's the cows. Whenever Fanny took the well-worn path in the pasture between the barn and the old farmhouse, the little spring lambs would gather and talk to her as she limped by. No sooner would they start rushing through the clover than the old ewe would call them back to the flock. "Come back, little lambs, and don't be bad. You'll just embarrass her. Besides, she has nothing to say." Poor old Fanny would just continue on her way. There's Fanny in the background. So none of the creatures would talk to Fanny as she went quietly on her way. None, that is, except for a scruffy little puppy named Ruby. Little Ruby had no parents that anyone could remember and slept in an old building filled with hay. Ruby loved to kiss and lick the other animals of the farm. With each one of the creatures, it was the same, kisses and licks, kisses and licks. It was often said that Ruby was the fastest licker around. With tail wagging, she would sidle up to a chicken with sleep still in its eyes, and before that chicken could let out a cackle, her tongue was out, the lick was licked, and it would squawk, and oh yuck, oh me, oh my. So the chicken didn't like to have its eyes cleaned by Ruby, but Ruby didn't care. She was fast. She could clean up that chicken's eyes real fast. Well, all the animals that had been licked and loved by Ruby so much, that one day an old ewe and a bossy cow cruelly dared the little puppy to kiss old Fanny as she hobbled on her way. Ruby took the dare, and hiding in the tall clover that grew by the fence, she waited for the cat to come by. Sure enough, in no time at all, Fanny came hobbling along. With a leap and a giggle, Ruby dashed from the clover and gave Fanny a long, loving lick, from the tip of her nose to the top of her head. That little dog surely was the fastest licker around. Old Fanny didn't try to run away like the other animals. Instead, she just licked and loved that scruffy puppy right back, lick for lick. Contrary to what the barnyard animals had thought, Fanny wasn't embarrassed in the slightest, and she had a lot to say. Ruby and Fanny sat on the path for the longest of times, just licking and loving and laughing about this and that. Later, in the old wooden barn, they curled up together in a warm pile of hay. As the sun peeked through the cracks and slats, they fell fast asleep, curled up in each other's love. So there they are, all snuggled in the hay. From that day forward, the two of them were thought of as one, for they shared all the farm had to share. Together they hobbled and hopped from here to there and back again. They stopped at the chicken pen and talked with the chicks about the weather and chatted about the sunflowers that grew so very tall. The chicks were shocked to find that Fanny wasn't embarrassed by her handicap at all. She had a lot to say. They chatted with the calves at the dairy barn. The calves were so moved by what Fanny had to say that they shared some milk they had gotten from the old bossy cow, who just looked the other way. That cat meowed and meowed loudly, so that all the other could hear all about her life on the farm, a tale she had never been able to share before. Fanny and Ruby walked through the meadow of deep purple clover, talking to the lambs as they frolicked and played, and they too learned that she had a heart full of things she wanted to say. So she went around talking to everybody on the farm with her friend Ruby. From that day forward, the lambs and the calves, the chicks, a scruffy little puppy named Ruby, and a handicapped three-legged cat named Fanny were the best of friends, for Fanny had never been handicapped by what she was, only by what the other creatures thought she was. As you walk, hop, hobble, or wheel, meeting people of different kinds, remember that being handicapped is only a state of mind. And that is the story of Fanny. And I hope that you'll remember to not judge people by the way they look, to get to know people and help others feel comfortable around other people that may have a hard time with people that are different. Together, one by one, little by little, we can all make a difference. You guys have a great day.